What's up, guys? It's been with 2020 election predictions, and today I'm going to show you why the 2020 election will be easier to predict than you think. And this isn't clickbait. I have my data out. I made a good PowerPoint to show you. But let's first start out with this electoral map. I really only think that four states are going to matter in the 2020 election. Some of these states are going to be red, some of these states are going to be blue. I don't know exactly how it's going to be, but let me try to explain myself. So, I do think it is possible, not likely, but it's possible that North Carolina goes blue, for example, or Michigan goes red, for example, or even maybe a state like Ohio or even Georgia to go blue. I don't think that's likely, but I think that if Georgia, North Carolina, or Ohio go blue, then Joe Biden has won the election, and we don't even have to count any other votes because if North Carolina is going to go blue, then that means states that like Pennsylvania or Arizona are going to go blue too and put him over 270. So like right now, if just North Carolina goes blue, it's not the magic number of 270 to win, but there's no way in my mind that North Carolina goes blue and some of these other states go blue because if Joe Biden were to win North Carolina, that would mean that nationally he is outperforming how Hillary Clinton did in 2016, and I think that all these states are on a continuum like this right here. So you see Colorado, Biden has the biggest margin kind of out of all the swing states, and that Donald Trump is doing the best in Texas. But these are all on a continuum, and in 2016 these were all shifted towards Donald Trump, and right now all these states are shifted towards Joe Biden, but they still remain in this order. So I think that if Donald Trump were to win the state of Michigan, although right off the bat, it doesn't look like that he would have enough electoral votes to win. If Donald Trump wants to win, if Donald Trump does win Michigan, I can say with pretty darn certainty that he would win Wisconsin and Pennsylvania because they have similar type demographics, and because Michigan is the hardest out of all the Rust Belt states for a Republican to win. So if Donald Trump were to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, and he would also win a state like North Carolina, and he would likely win either Arizona or Florida. So going back to what I had it at before, um, I had it at a 245 to 220. Um, the where it gets a little more dicey is if Wisconsin were to go to the Republicans, then I think there are some scenarios where Donald Trump could win. For example, if he would win Florida and Arizona, then he gets to the magic number of 270. But Joe Biden could easily win by say if Donald Trump won the state of Wisconsin. I think this is a very plausible outcome. Also we could see here it's like, let's say that Joe Biden wins the state of Pennsylvania per se. Well, it is still possible that Donald Trump still wins overall if he wins Florida, Arizona, and Wisconsin. There's just a lot of different outcomes that we see. I actually unclicked DC. I was wondering why that was 268 and not 265. But also, what I think is if Joe Biden won a state like Wisconsin, I would expect him to win it out large because I would expect him to win Pennsylvania too because he does have an advantage in Pennsylvania. So these states are not completely independent of each other. And let me explain with this kind of quick PowerPoint I made. I promise I won't bore y'all with this, but this is where I kind of think I think that there's six states that really could go either way, but I really think there's four states that will really matter, and these are the four states in bold, and I think they are on a continuum, and I made three different scenarios on how this continuum could work because I do not think we know exactly where Donald Trump and Joe Biden are going to have their strengths and weaknesses. For example, this graph shows that Donald Trump has a distinct advantage in the Rust Belt, or he overperforms in the Rust Belt in the polls. But you can see here that like my number one predicted thing doesn't actually match necessarily what the polls say. So I have Michigan on top, Pennsylvania, then Arizona. If we see here, we have Michigan, but we have Pennsylvania under Wisconsin and Florida. And right now I have Wisconsin and Florida more favorable to Donald Trump than Joe Biden, but these have Wisconsin in Florida more favorable to Joe Biden. So that is fairly interesting, but I use more than just polls. So historically, Wisconsin and Florida have been more favorable to Donald Trump. For example, in the midterms, the Republicans won Florida in 2018 by pretty by margins that you would not expect. I think in that 2018 Democratic wave year. So what these numbers by these states mean is if Donald Trump were to win Michigan and all the ones underneath it, he would replicate his victory in 2016 and get 306 votes. If Donald Trump were to win Pennsylvania and all the states down, he would have won 290 votes. This is assuming that he loses Michigan. So this is 270. You just add up all the states down and then plus all the ones that were red in my first electoral map. So if you only include the outcomes in bold, you have five potential outcomes. Either Donald Trump wins all of them, he wins Arizona, Wisconsin, Florida, he wins Wisconsin, Florida, he just wins Florida, or he loses all of them. So that's five different outcomes. And as you can see, out of these five outcomes, Donald Trump wins in two of them. If he wins all these states in bold, he gets 290 electoral votes. If he wins three out of the four states, Arizona, Wisconsin, and Florida, and I'm putting them on this continuum on purpose, then he wins very narrowly with 270 votes. However, we also see that Joe Biden wins three out of these five outcomes. So it's the opposite. It's flipped for Joe Biden. So um, if he were to win Arizona in this thing, so it would be Arizona and all the states above it. So he would win Arizona, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. That gives him 278 electoral votes, enough to win the electoral college. If he only wins Michigan and Pennsylvania, he only gets 268. But we see these outcomes: 278, 386, and 315 if he wins Florida, which I think it is possible based on this recent polling. You see that three out of these five outcomes favor Joe Biden. So those are kind of the five outcomes out of this scenario, and I have three different scenarios. I hope I'm not confusing you too much. So this is a similar outcome, but I actually think that Arizona potentially could be more blue than Pennsylvania this go around. Donald Trump had a distinct advantage in the Rust Belt in 2016, and poll shows that that advantage kind of remains for the most part. However, where Donald Trump is maybe losing some support could potentially be in the Sun Belt. In Arizona, he won that state by 3 points, but there has not been a poll in the last 3 months that has Donald Trump on top. So I think that Arizona could be more blue than Pennsylvania in in 2020, and this is the scenario like that. So you see, we have five scenarios, and it's very very similar to the other one that I talked about. If Donald Trump wins all four of these states, he gets 290 electoral votes and wins. If he wins Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Florida, kind of he gets two out of the three Rust Belt states, but keeps Florida. He can still afford to lose Arizona and keep on winning. However, if he loses Michigan and Pennsylvania and Arizona, then he's lost it, even if he holds on to Wisconsin and Florida. So Joe Biden wins three out of these five outcomes, and Donald Trump wins two out of these five outcomes. And as you can see that some of these outcomes are the same. So the Wisconsin and Florida outcome, like they're in the same order. So if Joe Biden were to win Wisconsin and Florida in both these outcomes, he would win overall. And lastly, this is the outcome that that suggests that Donald Trump keeps his support in the Rust Belt, overperforms in the Rust Belt, but underperforms in the Sun Belt. And in the Sun Belt, I mean like the swing states of Arizona and Florida and I'm not even including Georgia and Texas in this outcome because if Donald Trump were to lose Texas or Georgia, then there's nothing to talk about because he's lost the election. So, and this is we see the same thing again. 2 out of 5 of these outcomes, Donald Trump wins, and 3 out of the 5 outcomes, Joe Biden wins. So in this scenario, you can see that Florida is the tipping point state, because in both these outcomes, if Joe Biden were to win it, he gets 285, and if Donald Trump were to win it, he were to get 279. So going back to this other scenario, which flips Arizona and Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania is the tipping point state with its 20 electoral votes, 276 and 279. And in this last, in my first projection, which I have the most confidence in, Arizona is the tipping point state. So I expect in the presidential election that either Arizona, Pennsylvania, or Florida will be the tipping point states. I think that this is the closest outcome that it could be. And even if one of the congressional districts in Maine or Nebraska flips, then um, it could be a tie, but I think this could be one of the potential outcomes. But if Joe Biden were to win Arizona, then he's won the election right there. So there you have it. I really hope you like this video. I do not think that the 2020 election will be hard to predict when it comes to election day. Only 4 to 6 states will matter. Maybe you could even argue only 2 or 3 states matter, but be on the lookout for more videos tomorrow, and please subscribe here if you haven't already.